Have you ever witnessed strange lights in the sky or experienced missing time? If so, you're not alone. These high strangeness incidents happen to people every day, all over the world, and we want to get to the bottom of them. Since 1969, MUFON has been at the forefront of UFO stopping now. Join Alex and Ruben, a team of highly skilled MUFON field investigators with years of experience, committed to getting to the truth. We'll investigate UFO events through guest interviews and witness accounts, analyzing data from various to unravel the mysteries of the unknown and get answers to the questions that have been unanswered for so long.
Hello and welcome to MUFON Up Close. I'm Alex Susia and I'm joined with Ruben Uriarte.
Hello there, Alex.
How are you doing, Ruben?
You doing good there, and just looking forward to hearing our two guests. They're dynamic folks, and then from what I've read, they have a lot to share with our audience today.
Yeah, I think they're both going to be fantastic. Why don't we? I'm going to go ahead and introduce them both. So our first guest is Joshua Bertrand, who is a Canadian technology researcher. Joshua graduated with a bachelor's of mathematics from the University of Waterloo in 2002. He spent 20 years working as a database storage expert for Router Cisco Systems, Electronic Arts, and SAP Canada. In his retirement, he researches aerogels, lighter-than-air technologies, and their intersections with the UAP-UFO phenomenon. He can be reached on X and Twitter at the account Korea_UFO. We'll go ahead and put that up as well so that people can look that up. Our second guest is Bob Spearing. Bob graduated at NYC's Fordham University in 1981 with studies concentrating on journalism, propaganda, and public opinion and journalism. He worked at the Port Authority in Newark and New Jersey for 34 years and has a forensics and managerial background as well as a locomotive engineer license. Bob joined MUFON in 2013, was MUFON's 2018 Field Investigator of the Year, Volunteer of the Year in 2023, and works on various special projects for MUFON. Currently, Bob is the Director of International Investigations and curates the Project Aquarius Digital Historical Library, with over 2 terabytes of data and growing. He has appeared on Ancient Aliens, UFO Lost Evidence, and numerous radio shows and podcasts. Please join us in welcoming Robert and Josh.
Hey,
Ruben.
Gentlemen, great.
Nice to be here.
Thank you both for joining us. Both, very impressive. I'd love to know, where you guys kind of came across and met each other.
That's an unusual story in and of itself. We MUFON back in 2023 got a MUFON report from Russia, and it was a fellow who claimed that he was in contact with an entity called Timothy when he would do these CE5 meditations. And meditations material was appearing around him in his living room that Timothy told him was debris from his spacecraft that crashed 12,000 years ago. So we looked at it like a typically contactee type report, but he said, no, you don't understand. I have evidence. I have the pieces. I've had them tested at various laboratories in Moscow, and it's unknown material. And we said, send it to us, and our lab in Missouri would investigate. And we analyzed it, and we couldn't figure out what it was either. And when we put that pretty much out at the symposium, that we had this material that needed further testing, Josh caught wind of it, and Josh was an aerogel expert, and it would turn out that what we had was actually a type of aerogel. And so we started going back and forth with Josh, and at last year's symposium, he really helped me with the presentation that we did on the follow-up laboratory analysis on the material that turned out to be a graphene aerogel. So that's pretty much, he came across us with this piece of aerogel, and we got in contact with each other and been working together ever since.
That's exactly correct.
Very neat. And Bob, you gave a presentation on the this piece of material for 2 symposiums in a row, right?
Yes. Yep. I didn't think we get into it this early, but after we tested the material, the first material, it had to come to us through Turkey because the Ukraine war was going on. So this fellow, what's his name, Arkady Grushenkov, had to send it via Turkey to our lab in Missouri. All right, and he got it there, amazingly enough. And when our analysis couldn't figure out what it was, I wanted to present it at the 2023 symposium in Dallas. And so our lab technician mailed it to me, certified, all right? And I got the little electronic notice on my telephone that it had arrived at my mailbox. Now, I live in a community in the Poconos in Pennsylvania. It's like a gated community. We don't get mail delivered to our house. We have to go to a mail room. And the back side of the mailbox is postal, U.S. Postal Service. The outside is community, the vestibule, and there's cameras aimed at the walls of mailboxes. So I get the notice that it arrived. I go to, and there's nothing in there but a yellow pages and a supermarket flyer. And the clerk said, Bob, I put a little white box in your mailbox yesterday. We noticed the cameras were turned away from the mailbox wall towards the door instead of the mailboxes that they should have been looking at. There's also a side door where you can come in. So if you have a master key, you could take the sample unseen. And so we wondered who would steal something from the United States mailbox. Maybe the United States government. And we'll probably get into that later, where it may have ended up, right, Josh?
Yep.
So anyway, I panicked, all right? And the United States Postal Service would not investigate it. And I'm 3 months out from the symposium. The sample's gone. And I reached out to Andrei Grushenkov again. We started communicating one way with Signal, the other way with WhatsApp. And I managed to get him to send another sample to an undisclosed location. We were using U.S. snail mail with stamps because it was apparent that somebody was monitoring our MUFON email accounts and knew where the sample was the first time and took it. So we wanted to make sure we got the second sample, and we did. And we presented it at the 2024 symposium. And at that, Secretary of Australia was there. And he's a neuroscientist, and he's affiliated with a laboratory called Paranormal Research Australia, which is a highly accredited lab. I believe it's in Sydney. And they did $20,000 worth of gratis work for us and delivered a 42-page report that was absolutely stunning. So maybe after the break, I actually have the little tiny piece of aerogel that we have left. I'll show it to you guys. But it's in my other room. I forgot to bring it in. So that's what happened. And later on, when we get into this discussion with Josh, I'll tell you about the lab results and everything that's been going on with this Russian sample. It's really an astonishing story.
Bob, just quickly, for our audience, can you describe what is an aerogel?
Josh should do that.
All right.
Sure. So an aerogel is a solid material that's been reduced to its lightest form. If you have a normal gel and you remove the liquid parts of the gel, you're left sort of with a skeletal solid that's filled with a lot of tiny pores where the liquids used to be before they were removed. And that's sort of the definition of an aerogel, a light, porous material. I have one here. This is a chunk of aerogel foam. It's made of polyimide. It's quite light. It's also quite strong. You can try and bend it, and this isn't bending, but it's very light. So many aerospace uses for these materials, and they've been around for a long time. Aerogels go back to the early part of the 1900s. A man named Samuel Stevens Kistler was credited with the first synthesis of aerogel, and he documented that in Nature magazine in 1931. So we have quite a history of aerogels. I'm happy to go through all of it and explain how we got to today, and then discuss the MUFON sample, because it doesn't appear to have any human origins. And as Bob hasn't noted yet, part of PRA's testing identified that this sample has previously been in space before making it to Arcadia in Russia. So it has an interesting origin that we haven't been able to fully trace back.
Wow.
So, maybe if we start at the beginning, Kistler in 1929 was a professor at a small university in California, I believe. And he decided to take a semester off, and he went to Europe. And if I'm correct, Josh, while he was in Europe, he met Einstein and the fellow, was it the Dutch?
Knudsen.
Knudsen. And what was Knudsen famous for?
Knudsen had previously, about a decade prior to Kistler's invention of aerogel, Knudsen was working on what was known as gas flow theory and Knudsen flow theory, and all of these theoretical ways that gas could move through tiny pores in a material. And the suspicion that I have now is that both Knudsen and Kistler were reverse engineering an existing material, and that the inventions of Knudsen gas flow theory and of aerogel itself are both, rather than unique inventions, reverse engineering. And that's after looking at all of the documentation, all of the papers that they were writing all at the time, the journals of Kistler, the sourcing of the prior art of these inventions is not there. And usually that is because of a reverse engineering effort.
There's almost nothing in Kistler's source material as to how he came about inventing this. But when he came back from Europe, all of a sudden he becomes a sensation because he develops this aerogel. And he initially tries to sell it to DuPont. He gives them a 6-month, I believe, contractual study, and they turned him down. And then next he got to Monsanto, and that's another interesting story. Okay, Josh, why would Monsanto want aerogel?
So at the time, Monsanto was, as it is now, a large chemicals firm, and they in Boston had a factory set up that used alcohol to produce this aerogel. So they licensed the aerogel patent from Kistler and the US government. And in the 40s and 50s, Monsanto is making a specific variant of aerogel called Santocell, and they're using it to cool down industrial parts. So if you have a metal rivet and you're wanting to put it into a hole, you can chill down that rivet with aerogel because it'll absorb the heat. And acting as an industrial refrigerant at that time, it's fairly unique in its ability to carry out that chilling process on an industrial site in the 30s and 40s. After Monsanto has it, the US government does eventually consolidate the aerogels research back into government hands. And in about 1956, when the Atomic Energy Act has sort of taken hold and they're consolidating a bunch of these research areas, all aerogels research, as well as all lighter than air, helium, and hydrogen research, gets concentrated at 3 places, and they are Wright-Patterson Air Base, the Redstone Arsenal, and Los Alamos National Labs. So in the 1950s, you see all of these materials consolidating to the same places that are supposedly working on UFOs and UAP, and the crash recovery analysis of those is going on at the same place as the aerogels research. So certainly an interesting coincidence. I think there's more than a coincidence in that usage. We'll later talk about the history of lighter than air vehicles, and I think all of those tie back into aerogels and these UAP incidents. A lot of them individually can be examined, and some of the evidence points to our own craft.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, we were talking before about that Kistler may have actually reverse engineered a material that he somehow came in contact with. If you go back to the airship wave of 1897, you get a lot of these cigar-shaped objects. And we're eventually going to take this, Josh and I, is all the way to the Tic Tac.
Yeah,
okay, so where did the reverse engineered material come from? Josh has one thought, I have another thought. Josh believes that it may have come from the Aurora, Texas 1897 crash. Okay, and what's interesting about the Aurora, Texas crash is they've done searches of the well where they believe that some of the material from the downed craft may have been found, but they found nothing. And that may be because they didn't know what they were looking for, because one of the things about aerogel is that you don't really need an engine. Okay, so if they were looking for mechanical parts to a craft that can fly without an engine, and Josh can get into that later, they wouldn't know what they're looking for. So there might actually be pieces of aerogel all over Aurora, Texas, for all we know, even today. Crash of something that came down from the sky, witnessed by multiple people, and slammed into a bunch of trees. And it had no pilot, and it had no engine. And this was verified by Jerome Clark, who found Jerome Clark was the former editor of Fate magazine. He wrote the UFO Encyclopedia, and he actually found a newspaper article that described that story in detail. So again, you have something crashing down from the sky that people believed was a craft that was pilotless, and they were confused because it had no engine. And again, if you're using aerogel, you don't need an engine. But that technical aspect of it all, I would leave up to Josh to explain, because
when you mean lighter than air, basically the material itself is basically can elevate or fly or whatever without any propulsion system. Is that?
Yeah, the aerogel material can become buoyant through actually several different processes. In one, several variants of aerogel, mostly carbon aerogels, you can heat the material up by either exposing it to a heating coil, or by honestly just using concentrated light. If you focus enough light on a piece of carbon aerogel, the air that is trapped in those tiny pores of the aerogel material gets hotter, and when air gets hotter, it expands, and so it loses its density at the same time. So when the air trapped inside of the object becomes lighter than the atmosphere that's surrounding the aerogel itself, the object is buoyant and it can lift up in the atmosphere. So
wow,
there are some videos that I've shared of carbon aerogels where just shining a light on them causes them to float up in the lab, and It's quite interesting. There's another process where, because aerogel itself can contain a vacuum, you can make a sphere or a tic-tac cylinder of aerogel, and on the inside of this shell, you're containing a vacuum, so there's nothing on the inside. That entire craft, the shell with the vacuum on the inside, can become lighter than the air that surrounds it in the atmosphere, and so it as well can become buoyant and lift up, becoming a lighter than air
That
craft.
explains.
These are
Sorry, there's Josh.
These are typically your airships, your aerostats, your balloons that are filled with hydrogen and helium. Goes back to the 1600s. We can get into a bit of the history of that program because some of those technology steps do align with the sightings that get seen at the time. So a lot of us that have investigated UAP for quite a while realize that there's an aspect of the phenomenon where it seems to, quote unquote, mimic our technology process and our technology progress. Part of that could be that we are, in fact, seeing advanced human-made prototypes that are being mistaken for alien craft because the prototypes, the programs themselves, are at the time classified. So even if you're working in the Navy or the Air Force, just because you're a member of the armed forces doesn't mean that you know the entire capabilities of the armed forces. Some of these programs make one-off prototypes that are only seen by the engineering team that works on it. And when it gets demonstrated in the atmosphere, sometimes these craft crash and require crash recoveries. And as we discussed, those 3 sites that they concentrated the aerogels and lighter than air materials research at, when you do a craft recovery, the debris gets sent back to those same sites. So if you have a crash of a lighter than air prototype, the debris will get sent back to Redstone Arsenal, Los Alamos National Labs, or Wright-Patterson Air Base.
Yeah, how does it handle in water?
That's a great question.
The ocean.
So aerogel itself can be super hydrophobic, which means that the material, the aerogel material itself, will repel water naturally. So one of these craft, as we've theorized them, that contains a vacuum, can operate just as well in the atmosphere and underwater. So
And in space?
It's multimedia. And in space. Aerogels have been tested in space. They took a patch of aerogel and stuck it to the outside of the International Space Station and left it there for a couple of years, and remarkably resistant to degrading compared to other materials. If you put in one of these aerogel craft in space and you have multiple compartments within the larger craft, you can have a pressurized compartment for crew and passengers, and the aerogel will actually retain that pressure inside the craft so that it doesn't leak out into space, and vice versa. It'll prevent the void of space from sucking the atmosphere out of that separate part of the craft. As well, the aerogel does provide protection from cosmic rays and charged particles in space. So there are certainly a lot of positives to having a spacecraft made with an aerogel exterior, or at least aerogel panel.
And it would be the perfect material for a transmedium UFO.
Yeah,
Okay.
I believe, yeah.
Bob, do you know if you guys tested heat or water on your sample?
No, what they did in the laboratory was a lot of electron microscope work, and basically what they came up with was that They could tell that the material had been in space because it had been exposed to cosmic rays. They also discovered that it wasn't a graphene aerogel, and they also discovered that it was comprised of a molecular structure using carbon-60 fullerenes, buckyballs, which is the strongest form of carbon, a lot of times used in the aerospace industry. There was also some sort of crystalline structure to it that may have at one point been growing. So all in all, it was a very unusual material, but the most startling two aspects of the entire 42-page report was that A, they could not identify the manufacturing process, and B, they could not identify any sort of manufacturer on Earth in their database that would be able to manufacture something like this. Interestingly enough, I got a call from Josh maybe 2 or 3 months ago because there was a fellow at Lockheed Martin. What was his name, that scientist?
Richard Bandurich.
Bandurich says that Lockheed Martin acquired multiple samples from multiple non-governmental organizations over the years through the United States government, and one of the samples that they had the ability to absorb heat, which is exactly what an aerogel does. And this scientist claimed that we don't have that technology, that it's 200 to 300 years in the future, possibly. Okay, so this caused quite a start. Russ Coulthart reported it, and that seems to be exactly what the sample that was stolen from my mailbox would be able to do. So if what was stolen from my mailbox isn't in Lockheed Martin's hands now, and that's the sample they're talking about, there are other samples just like the one that MUFON lost that are out there and making their way to Lockheed Martin.
Is there a difference between lighter than air and anti-gravity?
So
are they?
Anti-gravity contains lighter than air, but is expanded past that. I think when they're referring to an anti-gravity craft, it's a craft that has the ability to separate itself from the typical restrictions of gravity and inertia in any way. A lighter than air craft would still be subject to the gravity and inertia of physics in our planet, but because it is buoyant, it would be able to resist the attraction of gravity. So a buoyant craft will be able to rise in the atmosphere without having a typical engine or a fan, just because it is lighter than the surrounding air.
That's fascinating.
Whereas an anti-gravity craft, as theorized, would use some kind of a bubble to separate itself from the craft. So it's relying on some kind of additional engine to produce that bubble.
Excellent.
When did we start seeing aerogels start being used in any kind of flying vehicles?
Well, they're used today in modern planes. Some parts of the plane are replaced with They replace the traditional metal or plastics with an aerogel just to save weight. If you save a couple pounds of weight on an airplane, you're saving a lot of fuel over 1 year of service. So sometimes even just minimizing the weight of a part can be one of the uses of an aerogel. But again, that has been largely in the past 20 years. So if aerogels have been around since 1931, about 90 years, it's only really in the last 20 that they've started to enter the aerospace field and in limited uses. There are a type of craft that we've briefly alluded to that contains a vacuum in a shell of aerogel. Those craft are called aerogel vacuum lighter than aircraft. They've been worked on by Los Alamos in the last 5 years. And the US government just last month put out a tender that says that the technology has been proven and that they're licensing it out to government contractors to go into full production of these vacuum balloons. So we see it right now in limited aspects of aerospace. I think we're about to make the leap where it replaces traditional helium and hydrogen ballooning.
Wow.
And Josh, you mentioned to me a couple of times that the advantage of not using helium is that helium is an exhaustible supply, that at some point the world will run out of helium that cannot be replaced. So why waste it on large aerostats?
Yeah, so helium is very difficult to renew resource. You can fractionally distill it from natural gas. So when you're processing natural gas, some percentage of that is helium. And if you distill that off while you're siphoning natural gas from a well, you can get some amount of production, quote unquote, of new helium. You can also generate helium in nuclear processes. That's relatively expensive for what you get. So because helium is used in other things for the human race, like if you require an MRI, you need helium to cool the magnets in it. If we put all of our helium into airships at the border, which exists right now, there's these airships made by Lockheed Martin called the Persistent Threat Detection System, or TARS, the Tethered Aerostat. And they sit at the border, they look down with cameras, and because they are filled with helium, they don't require engines, they just hover there on their own and look down. But now if we need to bring one of those back down, you have to vent the helium out of it or tether it down. Yeah. So some of these craft don't have tethers. They're big airships filled with hundreds of millions of liters of helium. If you want to bring that airship down, you vent the helium and you never are able to use it again. If you have a aerogel vacuum craft that doesn't require helium, it's just pumping our own atmosphere in and out of the vacuum chamber to change its buoyancy. So cost-wise, it's quite a bit more effective because helium has been getting more and more expensive too as we use more and more of it up on these airships. So and eventually it'll run out, eventually it'll get really expensive and we won't have anything to run MRIs anymore. So we're going to have to eventually figure out a different way to achieve buoyancy.
In 1994, I went on a UFO expedition to Puerto Rico, and I remember seeing the aerostat system that they had overlooking a lake. It was by the sea, but there was a lake called Laguna Cartagena, and apparently witnesses were seeing these objects coming in and out of the lake. And so it just so happened that they had the aerostat there, and whether the aerostat was there for the purpose of surveillance of that lake or also for drug interdiction as well. But yeah, that was always fascinating to see that. And then I saw the ones that are the aerostats along the border in Texas. Very similar features, yeah.
Yeah, they used them at a bunch of the military bases in Iraq and Afghanistan too. Problem is, it's a lot of helium to fill one of those up, and it vents out of them, and you don't ever get it back. It rises to the top of our atmosphere and hangs out near space.
So now the question that everybody always asks Josh is, well, if you release the vacuum to make it go up or down, it can go up or down super fast. but people always ask the same question: how do you make it go horizontal? The object, and you mentioned solar panels and lasers and stuff like that.
Yeah, so there's a couple of theoretical ways that you could move one of these ultralight vacuum aerogel craft. Traditionally, on a normal lighter than air helium blimp, you have an external engine. So a lot of the larger blimps will have big electric engines or big diesel engines attached to them, and they move around by using those to propel them. Aerogel craft could have attached engines traditionally, but there are other ways that you can move these extremely light objects around. In the 1960s in Canada, there were some experiments done out of Shirley's Bay, which is a military base near Ottawa. And what they did is they used microwaves to keep a satellite suspended in orbit for a year. So when the satellite would decay in its orbit and begin coming back down towards the Earth, they would hit it with microwaves, which would cause it to retain its station in the atmosphere. So in a similar process, you could use microwaves or a laser very tightly controlled to add energy to this craft and cause it to move around in that way, sort of controlling it by hitting it with pulsed energy. Another way that you can move these craft around is by taking advantage of that internal vacuum chamber. So because you can pull air into the vacuum chamber and exhaust the air back out of the vacuum chamber, you can use that to produce your own sort of motor, where the motor is the craft itself. It's drawing air in and it's expelling the air back out and using its own vacuum chamber and the properties of the craft to achieve that. So I don't think that would move very fast. The craft themselves are ultra light, so they do when you look at the acceleration curve, F equals ma, the force equals the mass times the acceleration. Because these craft are so light, you don't need a lot of force to accelerate them. So if you have an F-18, it weighs 20,000 pounds, it requires two big jet engines to push it around. You have an aerogel vacuum sphere that weighs less than a pound and is buoyant in the atmosphere. Well, if you applied the same force that you're applying to one of those jets by putting a jet engine on this lighter than aircraft, it could achieve radical accelerations. But as far as we understand, this is unproven. So if this is going on, it is truly going on in a black budget program where we aren't seeing the results of that. And there are some precedents for that occurring. Recently, DARPA had a drone called the Organic Air Vehicle prototype. And what this was a single ducted fan engine that would act as a drone itself. So that F-22 or F-18 that we were just talking about, take all of the plane, take the pilot, take the wings, take all of that off, and you're just left with an engine. Well, if you put a sophisticated drone controller on that engine, the engine itself can fly around without all of that weight of the rest of the plane. So it's also going to be able to outmaneuver the plane just because it's not carrying all of that extra weight around. And one of the pictures that I think I sent you, Alex, was the Kestrel drone, which, yeah, that's one of them there. So in the early 2000s, this program was started by DARPA as the Organic Air Vehicle Demonstrator prototype. And both Honeywell, defense contractor, and BAE, a British defense contractor, were funded to create a prototype of this single ducted fan drone. And according to DARPA at the time, the program went dead after both of BAE and Honeywell submitted their prototypes. But what had actually happened was BAE had been successful in their demonstrations to DARPA, and the program went silent for 2 decades. And now in 2025, 20 years later, it has come back out. And as you can see in that picture in front of you, they have succeeded at their goals of making a single ducted fan drone. And I actually believe they've been successful at this at a scale, as that drone is relatively small. It's got a fairly standard electric motor on it. One of the things that has been showing up in several UFO sightings is drones that appear to be this single ducted fan drone, but at the scale of a jet engine. So if you imagine that BAE Systems worked for 20 years on this, while at the same time, if they had a Rolls-Royce jet engine that they were doing the exact same modifications to, that Rolls-Royce jet engine would be able to function as a UAP. It could 90-degree turns. It could outmaneuver any jet aircraft that we currently have. And I do believe that they exist. And specifically, I believe that they are being tested at Eglin Air Force Base in Florida, because the Apollo spacecraft UAP that was seen on film by Congressman Tim Burchett, former Congressman Matt Gaetz, and Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna at Eglin Air Force Base, was described as a Apollo capsule covered with a gunmetal riveted coating and having an orange exhaust that caused blurry air at the back. Well, that pretty much describes a single ducted fan jet engine with a metal riveting around it. So if you imagine that single Kestrel drone that you just saw before this, and you put a bunch of metal around the outside to shield what your prototype is or provide a cowling for the air intake, you end up with that drone. And I think that's what they're seeing around Eglin these days.
I have a couple questions. The Tic Tac, it's rounded on both ends, right? There's no description of any sort of propulsion coming out of one end, and they're covered. Yet they're so maneuverable too, from descriptions of piloting encounters. But does that mean that it can still be ours, or is it extraterrestrial? Are we dealing with?
So I think it could be both. As Bob and I were discussing earlier, we don't know the source of some of these aerogels that are showing up on Earth. And part of the claim from Lockheed Martin is not just that they have those small samples that Bandurich was testing, but that they have an entire craft. And one of the claims is that Lockheed has fully analyzed and reproduced these craft, and we're looking to sell one of these craft to a different defense contractor. And as far as I understand it, it was Lockheed was going to transfer the craft to Bigelow Aerospace, BASS, and that it was blocked by Glenn Gaffney of the CIA.
You know what's interesting? If you remember Michael Crichton, who wrote the book The Andromeda Strain, Jurassic Park, he also wrote a book called Sphere. It was turned into a movie with Samuel L. Jackson and Dustin Hoffman, I believe. And basically, one premise of the movie is that a team of scientists are investigating a UFO on the bottom of the ocean. And when they get inside the UFO, which is like a giant sphere, inside is a United States aircraft made of composite materials that was built 300 years in the future. All right. So when we're talking about aerogel or composite materials, the plot of this book by Crichton, who seemed to have inside information on a lot of things, almost makes you wonder if the sample MUFON got that maybe Lockheed Martin has that's similar may actually be from several hundred years in the future and may actually be us, which would be, putting us into the whole time travel thing.
That's amazing.
More questions and answers.
Are you familiar with Joshua or Bob Fairchild Industries?
Von Braun?
They were into testing metals that can resist high heat. They were doing a lot of research on that. I was curious if that name or if that aerospace. I'm not sure if they're still around, but whether that their research has been also a part of this. Probably.
Josh, do you know I know a little bit about Fairchild, but
I don't know about that specifically, but a lot of the materials that they were likely working on have ended up back in industry and have been innovated over the last little while. A couple of those extremely heat-resistant materials ended up at Lockheed. The LH 900 and LH 2200 were used as the thermal tiles on the space shuttle. So on the bottom of the space shuttle, they had these cube silica tiles that were made by Lockheed that absorbed the heats of re-entry through the atmosphere. So certainly has been some progress on those heat-resistant materials.
So Fairchild, right? When Werner von Braun, who invented the V2 rocket in World War II, came over in Operation Paperclip, and he worked on secret projects in New Mexico in the 1950s, and then went on to work for NASA. And he basically designed the Apollo spacecraft that took us to the moon. He ended his career working at Fairchild Industries, and his secretary was Dr. Carol Rosen. And I don't know how many of you know Dr. Carol Rosen, but she claimed, and she did a lot of touring with Stephen Greer later on. She claimed that von Braun told her while they were at Fairchild that the fake alien invasion stuff, that basically the weaponization of space would take place in gradual steps. They would use the fear of terrorism, think 9/11, the fear of an asteroid collision. We just deflected the orbit of an asteroid to see if we could do it in the future, and fake alien invasion. And so it's fake. Everything's fake because it's all about the weaponization of space. And if you know anything that's going on right now with the Russians and the Chinese and the Americans, it is all about the weaponization of space. So when you hear now that Atlas, 3I Atlas is a spaceship, it's a mothership, Avi Loeb saying it's going to go behind the sun and launch an alien invasion, and all of the crazy stuff you're seeing on Facebook right now. Oh, it can go faster than the speed of light. Well, if it went faster than the speed of light, how could you see it? Because it would be energy. I mean, there's so much misinformation going on that vulnerable people can fall for, that I almost wonder if they're going to pull a fake alien invasion on us at this point.
It's definitely been used for the expansion of the reconnaissance state over the last 20 years. We now have Star Shield looking up, and we have NRO Sentient looking down, and all of the money that the government, all of our taxpayer dollars that the government has spent have funded a massive spy network that essentially covers every centimeter of planet Earth. And they're currently funding Star Shield, which is looking out. So a network of satellites that look out and cover every near-Earth object, and certainly looking for that alien invasion, whether it's actually coming. I severely doubt it. I think most of these craft that we're seeing right now are human-created dark prototypes that are not being acknowledged because we're in an arms race with two near adversary peers of China and Russia.
And Star Shield is Elon Musk, just like Starlink is. And a couple of years ago, I found a very interesting correlation between Starlink today and the Star Wars program under Ronald Reagan. There was one concept and a network of killer satellites that would go around the globe, all right? And basically, it looked like sort of an oval, long oval, with the solar array, sort of like a Venetian blind. All right, that was the concept drawing that you can find on Wikipedia, and it was going to be called Operation Brilliant Pebbles. But they came to the conclusion that that technology would not be achievable till the first quarter of the 21st century. If you look at the coverage map of Starlink and the coverage map that was projected for Operation Brilliant Pebbles, it's a concept drawing of an Operation Brilliant Pebbles satellite, all right, killer satellite. It is an exact duplicate of what a Starlink satellite looks like. So I've always been under the impression that Starlink isn't only for internet service, all right, that Starlink is probably a defensive weapon also. And now, in the first quarter of the 21st century, the technology was achievable.
Yeah, so before Elon's Starlink, they had a network of satellites operated by the NRO, the National Reconnaissance Office. And these satellites fed into a AI analysis system that took the data from the satellites, and the original intent of Sentient was to track Soviet missile launches. So if you see a hot spot on one of your satellite images, you could use the NRO Sentient system to track where that missile launch was headed towards, and it would give you an advance warning of where was being targeted. Starlink is an expansion of the NRO Sentient system. Every one of those Starlink satellites also has a camera that is looking back down at Earth. It is not just a communications satellite. It is a reconnaissance satellite that is acting as a communications relay.
I always was suspicious of that. Yeah, I live a couple hours away from Vandenberg Air Force Base, and they've been constantly launching missiles with Starlink satellites. And I thought, what's the relationship between, with the Starlink and with the military? Yeah.
All of the previous generations NRO satellite launches were also from Vandenberg, so it's a pretty good tell of what's going on. And the Chinese certainly are interested in what's going on at Vandenberg. They've had several of their citizens arrested for flying drones over the base in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're getting ready to head into a break now, and then we'll talk more about the Russian sample when we get back.
Excellent.
to your seats, Cosmic Explorers. KGRA Digital Broadcasting, the unrivaled #1 source for raw, uncensored paranormal and UFO talk radio, has just unleashed a sizzling online merch store. Stay cosmic on the move with accessories, rugged phone cases, vibrant yoga mats, and notebooks perfect for jotting down UFO sightings. Ignite your obsession with the unexplained through bold, exclusive gear that demands attention. Kicking off with the Supernova, the store launches 2 heart-pounding collections, KGRA Digital Broadcasting and Bishop James Long. Every item you grab helps power the network and its groundbreaking shows. Stand with the truth seekers. Act fast, score your stellar swag, and join the uprising today.
So you don't care about his life. You just care about covering up your little top secret stuff going on. Meanwhile, this man's dying. How dare you put these people in the military to defend us, and then when they come out, you just kick them to the curb.
MUFON is the voice of thousands of like-minded people who want to see change. We speak up against UFO secrecy. We engage governments and agencies around the world on the topic. We share information with the public through our journal, website, newsletter, social media, and even our own TV channel. When you join MUFON, you add your voice to the cause. Few things are more important in our time than understanding the UFO question. Join MUFON. Find your friends.
And we're back. Just one question before we do get into the sample. Josh, I'm just curious, how did you get into the topic of aerogels? What first interested you, or how did you get into the research?
I think the first time that I got interested in aerogels was when the announcement of a material called aeroloi was made for the first time. And what an aeroloi is if you have that skeleton of aerogel made from removing the liquid components of the gel, it can be very brittle. If you then take that skeleton and coat the entire thing in a polymer, you end up with what's called an aeroloi, and it's quite a bit more rigid than a typical aerogel. And when that innovation hit the scientific news for the first time, it started my interest in aerogels, and I've kept up with them ever since. In December, I'm going to be at the 3rd International Aerogels Symposium in Boston. So there's still a lot of interesting things going on in the field, even though aerogels have been around for 93 years. They're still cutting edge.
Hopefully we can get you in at some point at one of the MUFON symposiums to do a presentation on some of your research. It sounds like it'd be a great topic.
Yeah, that'd be great. Maybe co-produce something with Bob.
There you go.
I got a little tiny piece of aerogel from outer space there that nobody knows where it came from. So wow. I got to keep putting this back in a secret location because I don't want to lose the second sample. So, but yes, I think Josh would be an excellent speaker at a MUFON symposium. We're just actually getting started on creating lists of possible speakers for the next symposium, which will be the last week in August, this 2026 coming. So
very exciting, very exciting. So you have the one sample, Bob? They don't keep one at the lab, or they're just done with all the tests by now?
We only have one tiny little sample left. Yep. And it actually made its way all the way back from Australia to me. All right. So yeah, we may try to work with there's a university that may want to do some more analysis on it, but if we lose it, we never get it back. So there's a certain concern about things like that.
Of course, of course.
Did you have it right there, Bob?
Yeah, I have it right there. It's very tiny, very, very tiny. I have it in a little bag there at the bottom. Can you see it?
I can see the little black speck there.
Yep. It almost feels like a chip of plastic to me, you know. So,
did you look through it with a microscope? Have you looked at?
Yeah, they did. We have a 42-page report. It's remarkable.
Oh yeah,
Josh, you saw the report.
Yeah, I actually sent Alex, I think, 3 pictures from that report.
Yeah, so I can pull up a couple pictures to give people an idea of what the sample looked like, before Bob. Bob, of course, has a very small fraction of this left, but this was what the original sample looked like when it got to the lab. And you can see it looks very much like a rock, which Bob's earlier comments as to they didn't know what they were looking for in the well in Texas. It very well would have looked like rocks in the bottom. It could have been they saw a pile of rocks in the bottom, and this is what they saw, something similar to this material.
So that in itself, that's just a piece.
Yeah, and apparently Arkady Grushenko, he had dozens of pieces. He ended up vacuuming them up. He didn't know what they were. And then when it kept reappearing over the course of a week, he started to think that, hey, this isn't dirt.
Yes, that shows a bunch of the pieces that MUFON's received. The one piece that's indicated by the red arrow is the piece from the previous image that showed all 3 sides of that sample. I believe the piece that Bob still has in that bag is one of the smaller pieces, sort of central in this current image. And maybe Bob can tell us where the larger pieces ended up.
I think the upper right is the first sample that we lost, if I recall, Bob.
I believe that is the one. Yep, that was the one that was in the mailbox. And that was tested by 3 labs. And basically, the 3 labs used similar tools. They used X-ray fluorescence guns. And the 2 Russian labs were gemological labs. And they were able to analyze that 90% of it they couldn't identify. And 10% of it composed of titanium, carbon, arsenic, and several other trace elements. But that was about as far as they got. The MUFON X-ray fluorescence gun couldn't figure out anything. So the Russian labs were more sophisticated than ours. But the PRA sample, the Paranormal Research Analysis, Paranormal Research Australia laboratory really went into depth about it. You've got some more pictures there, right?
Yeah, so we have another good close-up of one of the edges.
And this is the fibrous crystalline type structures that they found within it. And at one point, they thought that these things were actually growing in the sample. And they were very, very strong. They saw what looked like holes that could have been like fatigue, where at a microscopic level, the way the space shuttle blew up, there may have been a reason for this craft from this alien Timothy, if that's a true story, that it may have crashed because there may have been some sort of fatigue. Heat got in, destroyed the craft in a space shuttle type of way. but I can't explain what these fibrous growths are or why they were growing at one point. I don't. Josh, can you?
No.
No. Okay.
So it's not organic or.
But I don't. I believe they may have actually used the word organic in the report, but I haven't looked at the report in like a year and a half now, so I can't be sure.
How is it different from the material graphite? When you show the other picture, the little black, I understand graphite is used also high resistant to heat. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, so you can have graphite and a version of carbon called graphene, and those both exist as natural solids. You can find them on Earth, naturally formed. The difference of this material is the specific porosity of it. The tiny little pores that are formed throughout the material are what makes it unique and what determines that it's most likely an aerogel. And graphene or graphite in its natural form would not have those tiny pores. It would just be a solid material.
Is this before the liquid, or is this after the liquid has been removed? Or
yeah.
Okay, that's what gives us that surface.
Hey, Josh, I just remembered 3 things that you told me. One is that aerogel, if it was being, say, used in a Tic Tac, it's a fairly slippery surface, so air goes around it easily. And also, you mentioned it has a very good stealth rating. Do you remember telling me those 2 things? Oh,
yeah.
And the golf ball pores. Could you explain that one to me? Like a
yeah,
golf
sure.
ball?
So we touched on it a bit earlier. Some of those super hydrophobic aerogels, because of the structure of the pores at the boundary of the material, at the outer layers of the material, as you said, it can be extremely slippery. So if you pour water onto a super hydrophobic aerogel, it will bead and run off, so it won't interact with the material itself. There's a natural repulsion.
The witness actually for this one, he actually had a couple videos of him. There's one good picture if he has the piece of stone sitting on a flower petal, sitting on like the inner areas. He also had another couple of videos of him putting it in a mug of water and just watching it float around. Didn't absorb the water, didn't sink as normal stone would. And I just always found that so fascinating that, this something that looks like a rock can just float there.
Mm-hmm. And I've seen a video where I think it was Lockheed Martin, where they showed a very, very bright heat lamp on the aerogel, and it actually like floated up off the table. All right, when heat was applied to it. But you said it had a good stealth rating too.
Yeah, so normal helium balloons are radar transparent. So if you try to detect a hot air balloon with radar, you may catch the gondola, but the balloon itself is completely invisible to radar. Similarly, these polyimide and carbon aerogels are also largely radar transparent. They don't give a good return to the radar signal. So just due to the material itself not being a strict like steel, aluminum, metal, you do gain a bit of stealth just through the material process itself.
And the golf ball divots that you told me about, explain that one to me.
Yeah, so one of the things that I've theorized about these rounded cylinders and spheres made of aerogel is that in addition to the super hydrophobicity providing that natural repulsion of water and air, the tiny pores that are on the entire surface of that material, because it is an aerogel, would act like the divots on a golf ball. So they would produce tiny vortices of air at the boundary levels of those pores, which would enable the material itself to reduce its interaction with the water medium or the air medium that it was moving through. So similar to how a golf ball has divots on the outside of it to produce those air whirls that would reduce the interaction as it's moving through the air after you've hit it, a aerogel sphere or an aerogel rounded cylinder would also have that going on at the nano scale because of the nanopores on its boundary.
Okay, the reason why I wanted Josh to do that, I forgot to send it to you, Alex, but I sent a video to Bill, our engineer, maybe 10 minutes ago, and I was hoping maybe he could get it up. It's something that we call fast movers in MUFON. We have 2 reports, and the internet has about 7 others. We are, say, filming autumn foliage over a lake in Canada, and all of a sudden this very small object, maybe big, blows by it. And when we did frame by frame by frame analysis, it looked like this little white thing that could have been like a small tic tac or sphere was going at an estimated 5,000 miles per hour. A month later, we got a second video, which is the one that I sent Bill, our engineer. And if you want, Alex, I'll resend it to you because I don't get a response from him. I'd like to show that before the end of the hour. The second one was over North Carolina, several thousand miles away, 3 weeks later. And the frame-by-frame analysis showed that that object was going 10,000 miles per hour. And these are low-altitude objects that are just happen to be caught by a drone 500 feet up in the air. And the witness who sent in this particular video that I'd like to show later actually slows it down to the point where you can actually see it coming frame by frame. At normal speed, you'll miss it the first 3 times that you're looking to see it. So I'm going to send that to you now, and maybe we can get that up before the end of the show. All right.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic.
Okay.
When you see things like that, Bob, what do you think you're seeing?
I mean, that's hard to say whether it's alien or, future technology or something experimental or something from one of our adversaries. But I mean, can you track something that fast on radar, Josh? 10,000? No, huh? Okay. So that'd be a perfect spy vehicle. All right. And if I have videos of these in Upper Canada, North Carolina, Germany, Wisconsin, New York State, think of the ones that we're not capturing accidentally with commercial drones. All right. There may be thousands of these things flitting at low altitudes all over the planet. All right. It's fascinating.
I'm going to specifically rule out our technology. Nothing that any of the labs have disclosed publicly that has made it into the publicly acknowledged technology sphere. Nothing goes 5,000 or 10,000 or even close to that. So it is either something that is completely in a dark program based on some of this technology, or it's non-human.
Or a future technology like Lockheed Martin may be suggesting.
Yeah, something's still in a black program.
It looks like, too, Bob, we do have that video ready to play up.
Okay.
So let's let it run.
Focus a little above the house on the lower right. And that's your best chance. See it coming? It's already gone.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah, I'm surprised they noticed it because it's so quick.
Yep. So there's 2 of these videos in MUFON's database, and there's about 5 more on the internet of exactly the same fast-moving object. And it's just going to repeat now for a while till the very end.
It doesn't look very big either compared
No,
to kind of what we're seeing.
much smaller than the house.
Yeah.
All right. It's like maybe 1/50th the size of the house.
And since the drone's at 500 feet and the object goes between the drone and the ground, you can determine a sort of maximal size for the drone because it's not something that's off at a distance. It's something that's less than 500 feet away from the drone at one point.
And what's scary is that, let's say this thing's flying at 250 feet above the ground at 5 to 10,000 miles per hour. What stops it from running into something? What is its maneuverability capability, to avoid something at that incredible speed, flying that low? So it's certainly not a natural object, that's for sure. So that's where we're at with these drones. And Josh, you didn't mention the Lash craft.
Oh yeah, Lash would have fit a bit earlier in this time frame. So at the 2003 Nimitz incident, we don't have aerogel vacuum drones at that point. They're the last 5 years, so you wouldn't have them for 15 years yet. But during the Lash incident, there was a lighter than air craft being tested in San Diego. And that craft is called the Lash, the Littoral Airborne Sensor Hyperspectral. And what it was is it's a sensor attached to the bottom of a balloon, and the sensor is used for looking down on the littoral area, so shallow waters. And it'll be able to see through the water, and marine biologists will use the Lash to track whale pods, but our Navy was intending to use the Lash to provide a heads-up awareness for submarines, where the submarine could launch from underwater an aerostat, a Lash aerostat, that would rise out of the water and provide a heads-up display of the surrounding area for the submarine. So to give it extra reconnaissance and extra awareness about its surroundings. And these were being tested in San Diego at the exact same time as the Nimitz incident. So one has to wonder, since these were being seen going up and down, which is something that a tethered aerostat can do, whether what they were seeing was this testing of the Lash going on in the same area as the Nimitz was doing its incident.
Wow. You mentioned our adversaries. What are the Russians and Chinese doing?
So I have seen evidence that the Chinese have taken wholesale this entire technology chain from America and just completely stolen it. And they have this base in their northern desert where there's this giant 300-foot long hangar that they have, where we've seen both their newest stealth drones being operated out of that hangar, as well as lighter than aircraft, including the large balloon that transited over North America. That's where they are taking those programs, which were developed with American taxpayer dollars at our national labs, and they've taken these DARPA programs and they're just making copies of them and ignoring the patents and rights surrounding it. So in addition to having the large balloons that have underslung payloads, We suspect that they've also stolen the aerogel vacuum craft technology. China and America right now are very contentious around aerogels. One of our domestic companies was going to use a Chinese manufacturer named Hualu to produce their aerogels. They were offering to produce them at a low cost. So the American company bit at that and gave them the designs and told them all the specifications of their developed secret aerogel. And Hualu took that and cut the contract. And now they flood the market with cheap knockoffs of that American company's aerogel. And we suspect that since they are putting a lot of funding towards these aerogel and lighter than air programs, that the Chinese are also working on creating these aerogel vacuum craft, but that the technology has branched where they stole it, and now their developed technologies and our developed technologies are diverging. So you'll see two perhaps separate technology chains as a result of this.
Wow, fascinating. Thank you.
Hey, can I go back to the Chinese balloon incident?
Always.
Yeah. It's one of my favorite cases. What's really interesting is that they shoot down the Chinese balloon probably with a Hellfire missile, because like we saw that video 2 weeks ago from the U.S. congressional hearings where there was an object off the coast of Yemen, which I believe was some sort of balloon personally, and they took it out, we think, because we never get to see the whole video, and they'll never release the metadata to prove it actually happened on October 30th, 2024 near Yemen. We just have to take, a congressman's word for it who got the video from somebody. All right. Yeah. So they took it out with a Hellfire missile. You can see the Hellfire one coming in from the left and passing it on the right. MUFON did an analysis where when it went through the balloon-shaped object, the Hellfire actually slowed down. And it's the type of Hellfire that doesn't have ordnance. It has blades. It's made to fly into a human being and chop them to bits, all right? Wow. Like a fan, yes, all right? So that's what makes me think this is a balloon. What's interesting, though, is that in the MUFON analysis, the three little satellite objects that deploy or pop out of the larger object, one of our photo analysis team members, Greg Sisko, state section director in Illinois MUFON, is an astrophotographer, and he stacked he used this astronomy photography software to stack images of the video one on top of another, and then he zoomed in, and the small object on the upper left is a cube. There's no doubt about it. It's a cube-shaped object that came out of the balloon. All right, but I digress because I want to go back to the February, what was it, 2022, 23 Chinese balloon shoot down. A week later, the United States military shot something down near Barrow, Alaska, on the tundra, okay, very top of Alaska. And then also it was either Alberta or
British Columbia.
Okay, they shot the second object down. And then the third object they shot down over Lake Huron near the upper Michigan Peninsula. And I want to just make a few analyses about the fact that after 5 days of searching for these three objects, they called off the search because they felt that the terrain and the weather were too against them and that they would never find these objects. So as far as the Alaska object goes, the United States has the ability to find.
I think we lost Bob talking about recoveries.
Okay. This happens to me all the time when I get to a good point. They could have found that object. All right. Now, the second thing is find the object in British Columbia because it was in dense forest. Later that year, a plane went down in the Amazon with a mother, a pilot, and 5 children, and they found that plane in a week. They actually found the kids alive about 3 weeks later. The mother died from injuries. But if you can find a small little Cessna in the Amazon jungle, and I was in the Amazon jungle, I flew over the Amazon. It's like 4 hours. You're flying in this prop airplane, and there's nothing below you but jungle. And they found that little plane in a week, all right? And you can't find something in the Canadian wilderness, but the worst part was the Lake Huron shoot down. That was an octagon-shaped object, according to the pilot, all right? They know where it went down within 10 miles, okay? In 142 feet of water, okay? And they claim they called off the search, but they didn't because 2 newspaper articles came out later that year that, 2 ships that sunk in the 1800s in Lake Huron were found. After 100 years, you suddenly find 2 ships. They were looking for something else and accidentally came across those ships, all right? How can you not find something in 142 feet of water? And I make my case by stating this. When the Titan submersible went down to the Titanic and imploded, the search field was the size of Connecticut in the ocean, in 12,000 feet of water. And they found that submersible in 3 days. So you can't find something in 142 feet of water in Lake Huron, all right? They either A, don't want to tell us because it was so embarrassing that they shot down balloons or hobby balloons, or B, it's something so bad they just can't tell us, all right? It's one or the other to me. But they found those objects. They're just never going to tell us they did. That's my opinion.
Yeah, and as we were discussing earlier, that NRO sentient system is going to see the explosion where the balloon gets taken out or the object gets taken out, and it's going to have a memory of exactly where that occurred over the Earth. So these aren't huge swaths of forest that they would need to be searching in British Columbia. They know the exact area, so they've probably already sent a crash recovery team out there. As for the Alaska one, as far as I remember, there was sea ice covering where the shoot down occurred, so any debris would have been able to be recovered off of the sea ice. It didn't go down into the ocean. And I have heard through secondhand sources that there was debris recovered at least the Alaska one. So, and that they said it was similar to aerogel, the person that told me that. So
yeah, the one in Alaska, they said
take
it was
that for what it's worth.
It was tic-tac shaped, the Alaskan one, right? Pilot said it was tic-tac shaped. What's interesting is that the octagon that went down in Lake Huron 2 years prior, because MUFON looked into how many other octagon sightings there were, and there were a lot, and a lot of them were near military bases. Within 5 miles of where they shot this object down in Lake Huron, there was a UFO report in the MUFON database 2 years prior of an octagon in that same area. So, this is a recurring thing. What's going on. And these octagons, they all seem to be within a certain size range, 30 to 60 feet, based on drawings that people submitted. And in one case, if you're familiar with Fran Ridge of NICAP, his MADAR 3 system, which is a series of little cigarette-sized devices you attach to your modem on your computer. And basically, it does 2 things looking for UFOs. They cost about $240 to become part of his network. They look for changes in barometric pressure and compass gyrations that seem abnormal. The barometric pressure are because they're looking to see if something's coming in from the atmosphere or leaving the atmosphere suddenly. And there was a UFO report of an octagon near Fort Knox, Kentucky, all right? And I forget the date, it was August something, 2023. At 4:18 in the morning, this fellow saw this giant octagon come down over his house. 4:18 in the morning. At the same exact time, Fran Ridge's Madar system closest to Fort Knox triggered at 4:18 in the morning. So we actually have forensic proof to verify that at 4:18 in the morning, something came in from the atmosphere that was octagon shaped. So
the Madar can tell you the shape too?
No, the witness in the report said that it was octagon shaped, and he actually drew a very, very well done illustration of it.
Wow.
That can't be too common of a shape.
No, I think out of 145,000 cases, we found something like 30 or 40, and about 8 of them had drawings, no photographs. But the people would draw comparisons, like they were on a highway in a car and they drew the octagon over the highway in a car. And just from knowing how wide the lanes were, we realized that these things are between 30 and 60 feet max. And the majority of the sightings were within 5 miles of military bases, including special operations in San Diego in one case.
I was just curious that this material, is it crash resistant or is it very fragile?
It's towards the fragile end. If you impacted one of these on the ground, it would likely break. But there are aerogels that you can hit it with a hammer and it doesn't shatter. So it's not just the original silica blue aerogels were very fragile. There are variants now that are more structurally, mechanically strong.
You might see where I'm going with this question, but how does lightning, what if it was hit by a lightning bolt? Would it cause it, say, a extraterrestrial craft?
If it didn't cause the craft itself to rupture, as long as the vacuum is being maintained on the inside of the craft, it's going to stay buoyant. So one of the things with these craft and some of the recent anti-drone weaponry, a lot of those rely on hitting a functioning electronic motor drone with EM of various sources and overloading the drone, which causes the motors to stop and the drone to fall out of the sky. The issue with these buoyant drones is if you hit a buoyant drone with that counter UAS energy system, buoyant drone isn't going to care. It's just going to keep floating and you're still going to have the problem. So there are ways to shoot these down, and it is more kinetic. As Bob was describing earlier with the Hellfire missile that penetrated an object near Yemen, he suspects it's a balloon. I also suspect it's a balloon. Alex, if you could bring the image of it back up where it shows the 3 images side by side. The first image on the left shows the Hellfire approaching the object. The middle image shows after the penetration of the object. And the third image shows 3 what are known as tag-alongs that have emerged from the object after it's been penetrated by the Hellfire. Now, what you've heard Bob says MUFON's not really sure what the objects are. Well, I'd like to offer the theory as to what these 3 tag-alongs are. Balloons can have what is known as gas bags or gas cells inside of the larger balloon itself. And here's an example image. I'm not saying that this is the exact balloon that was at Yemen. I'm using this as an example of the technology that may have been inside that object. So in some airships, you will separate your gas bags into individual gas cells. And I believe that the 3 objects that come out of the Yemen object are 3 of these gas cells being pulled out by the Hellfire missile. So I haven't really seen anyone else offer what they are or for those 3 tag-alongs, and I'd like to put this theory forward. I think that they are gas bags from inside of a balloon, and as it is in Yemen at the time, I would like to also offer that I think it is a CCP balloon that we are seeing. They had a surface reconnaissance ship in the area. They're not going to send that ship unescorted. I believe what we are seeing is one of these balloons that gets launched from a submarine to provide reconnaissance for the submarine. And I believe that we're seeing the Chinese version of it.
And we know that the Chinese were giving reports to the Russians for Ukraine. So it would not surprise me if the Chinese were given the Houthis surveillance information too.
That's actually confirmed. There is a Chinese CCP satellite firm that is providing satellite targeting. When its satellites go over our assets in the Red Sea, the Houthis are able to fire accurately at our ships, which means that the satellite that went over is the one that's relaying the data, and it's owned by a CCP entity. So the CCP is most definitely providing targeting information to both the Russians and the Houthis.
So you could say that we're effectively in a shadow hot war.
Yeah, and we have been for years now.
Now, Bob, were you able to see from the full video, does it show what happens to these 3, or does the video, I'm assuming, cut off before?
Video cuts off. Not only that, the source is dubious. They never released the metadata, which would tell you exactly when and where, what date, what time, and we don't get that. And the congressman that showed it, Eric Burleson, from Missouri, says that he got it from a source. That's what he says in the congressional hearings. Doesn't say how he got it. Mm-hmm. But what's more interesting is that Burleson recently hired former intelligence whistleblower David Grush for his staff. So the way I feel about these congressional hearings is that it's a lot of fluff and no substance. It's just to keep the public engaged, thinking about UFOs, while a lot of other secret projects go on. It's like you got to watch what the magician's doing with their right hand, instead of what he's doing with his left hand. So I don't put much credence in any of these videos that the government releases as possible UFO videos. I think that Josh is right, that this more than likely is a CCP balloon, and that they showed this stuff to get us all excited. That Atlas, that 3-1 Atlas, 3I Atlas is a possible mother attack ship coming to. I think it's just to keep us all excited and looking at the wrong hand, is my opinion.
So it's a distraction, basically. But yep. Why would they do that, Bob?
They've been doing it since the 1950s. Project Mogul was a CIA project to deceive the public, and I don't think Project Mogul ever ended.
So it's just a continuation of what the government's been doing all along.
And basically, we go back, and every 10 years, we reset, and we start from scratch, all right? And nobody looks back at the last 80 years of evidence, all right, compiled in MUFON symposium books from speakers like Stanton Friedman and Leonard Stringfield in their day. We just keep starting from scratch every 10 years. And it's a tragedy, I think.
Why do you think that happens?
Well, I think one of the reasons it happens is over the past, say, 60 years is that we didn't have the internet, okay? And we only had, 10 stations of broadcast TV until cable. So as AI comes along, the internet comes along, I think it's going to start to become harder and harder and harder for the government to hide things without people figuring it out. So I'm not hopeful for disclosure, but I'm hopeful that people will be able to have enough digitized information now and in the near future that it's going to become more and more difficult for the government to keep, looping us every 10 years. We're not innocent like we were in the 1950s. People have become very, very savvy. And, you put something up on the internet that's a fake, within, 10 hours, 200 people on Reddit have exposed it as a fraud. So I think the momentum's on our side, but I don't think the government's going to help us, is what I think.
You're probably right. Josh, where would you like to see aerogels go in the future? What kind of practical applications do you think that they can help with?
Well, there's applications outside of aerospace. There's quite a lot of biomedical applications for aerogels, including for implants and for therapeutics inside the body on aerogel substrates. There's some theoretical work around aerogel as a fuel, so using aerogel in a combustible way to provide efficient fuel source. The one thing that I most want to see is these aerogel vacuum balloons be developed into more than a prototype. I want to see this exist as a program, because if it doesn't, we run out of helium eventually, and then we lose that reconnaissance aspect. And if we lose our reconnaissance balloons before our enemies run out of that, then that gives our enemies an advantage over us. So it is best that while we still have that advantage of time and advantage of having an existing system, it's best that we think about the next system and what it's going to be replaced with in the future.
Who is working on the prototypes right now for those kind of things?
Los Alamos National Labs did the prototyping for the past 6 years. They were under the Triad National Services, who operates Los Alamos National Labs for the government. Triad is the company that absorbed what was formerly Battelle. So Battelle comes up often during the UFO topic research. They've become Triad. Triad is operating the lab and did the prototyping. The government's General Services Admin has now offered this out as a contract to defense contractors, and the announcement of who has won that bid has not occurred yet, but perhaps we'll hear something by December.
I take it that there's a research community of researchers that are studying this, lighter than air, and are there any? Not what I'm trying to say. Is there some more progress being done in terms of the research, what these things could be, and all the other things included?
Yeah, so there's different branches of research going on. The aerogels have their own lighter than air research branch, and there's a topic of interest for a bunch of different researchers. The traditional helium aerostats and balloons also have ongoing contracts and ongoing research and ongoing production. This year, I think they're British company, Kinetic with a Q, signed a $4 billion contract with the Department of War to provide an expansion to the aerostat reconnaissance fleets of the DOW. So there are definitely communities doing that research, and some well-paying contracts going out for being successful.
So where does it go? Where it might be extraterrestrial? When do you determine that it's not from Earth? And it was exposed from space.
Yeah, so for the MUFON PRA sample that we discussed earlier, you can definitely say that it's extraterrestrial because it's in the testing of the sample shown that it had prior exposure to cosmic rays. So before it ended up in a desk in an apartment in Russia, it had been in space getting hit by charged particles. And that leaves a fingerprint on the material itself.
But could it have been ours in space and not necessarily ET? All right, because I mean, when you look at Arkady Grushenkov's story, it really is sort of outlandish. And I've always wondered if somehow the guy was set up to get the material out of Russia.
Somehow. Yeah, I agree. It could have been one of these samples, like as I was saying earlier, right now we have aerogel in space that is human manufactured because it's on the outside of the International Space Station running a sample. The issue with the PRA MUFON sample is no one from NASA knows what that sample is. Like it wasn't made by our domestic programs. It never went into space on a Western rocket. So if it did go to space, that's leaving pretty much the Chinese and the Russians to have brought it there. And as well, I can find no existing Russian or Chinese manufacturer of a similar aerogel. The closest that you can get is a 1991 Chinese paper describing the manufacture of aerogels with buckyballs in them. It's not the same material though, and it certainly didn't ever go to space as far as we can tell. So because of the combination of being exposed to particles in space and not having an existing human manufacturer or reason for manufacturing a product like that, let alone bringing it to space, that leads me to believe that it started up there and came down instead of starting down here, going up and coming back.
So to summarize, there's four possibilities. Okay, one, the story that Arkady is telling us that Timothy, an alien, made this stuff materialize for him, that it came from space, is possible that it's extraterrestrial. The second part of that is that if it was reverse engineered by Kistler in 1929, 1931, from something that was retrieved from Aurora, Texas, or the Midwest in the 1920s, then that would also suggest that it had an ET origin. Or, as Lockheed Martin suggests, that the material seems to be manufactured in the future. Okay. Or lastly, it's from a secret lab in Moscow or Russia somewhere that we knew nothing about. And that's why it's not in any of the industrial databases. So it's either ET, time travel, reverse engineered secret Russian material that got smuggled out to MUFON and eventually to the United States government and then to Lockheed.
Or a natural source. It could have been created in a stellar process and just made its way to Earth eventually.
Bob, the spec that you have, how much more analysis needs to be done on it?
We're afraid to let it go, but there's one university that we reached out to that has a student program where they work with electron microscopy and such, that they're interested in analyzing it, but they don't want us to identify who they are because they feel it may affect their credibility working with the UFO community.
Oh.
Do you see a lot of stigma still in the industry, Bob?
Yeah, I mean, but UFOs are becoming very, very mainstream now. I mean, they're in the news almost every day. Congress is, validating it to the point where we don't look like tinfoil hat people anymore. So I think that the momentum as far as positive publicity for the UFO community goes, is on the rise. But I still think that the government's playing us, at the same time. But they don't look at us like tinfoil hat nut jobs anymore, like the 1960s newspaper articles. Every single one of those articles in the 60s and 70s, it was Ronald Reagan meets E.T. It was just buffoonery. They made us look like buffoons. But there's also the problem of so many people who are pseudoscience oriented. Okay, they're not sending material to labs and getting $20,000 worth of work. They're saying, 3-eye atlas is going faster than the speed of light now and has a headlight on it. Those types of things don't help, UFO research advance. All right. So I don't want to sound like a debunker because I've had my own experiences. So I know that the phenomenon is real, but, a lot of it's obscured by people who make us look ridiculous. But I think it's becoming more mainstream now. And I think that's a good thing.
And we have a great team here in MUFON. Bob, how would some of our listeners go about joining us as an investigator or getting more involved in MUFON?
All right. So, I joined in 2013 and it was the best thing I ever did. To become a MUFON member costs as little as $6 per month, and you get the digital version of our monthly magazine, two newsletters monthly, access to our UFO-oriented member-only social network. And also, most importantly for me, is that you as a MUFON member get access to our 145,000 case database, which has videos, photographs, narratives about what happened to some of these people. And some of these stories are incredible to the point they'll make your hair stand up. We have 700 field investigators. So for those people here that are interested in actually investigating UFOs, it's a little bit of a process. You have to purchase a book, take a test to get certified. It teaches you a lot about astronomy. There's some trigonometry, how to use interview techniques. But being a MUFON field investigator is one of the best things I ever did. You have to be a member first. And on the screen right now, if you see something or you feel you've been abducted, you can click on report a UFO or report an abduction. We make our database available to the public. All right. Some of it free, some of it through memberships. But remember, if MUFON ever goes away, private corporations taking UFO reports and governmental agencies like AARO taking UFO reports are under no compunction to ever tell you the results of their investigations. So keep ufology free and open and grassroots and report to MUFON. We've been doing the Air Force's business since 1969.
Well, thank you, Bob. That's all very helpful. And of course, we always love to join our team. Even if you're not interested in joining MUFON per se, there are still a lot of chapters out there that do have meetings that are open to the public. Some of them are on Zoom. Some of them are in person. Just a great place to meet like-minded people and talk about these kind of things that you can't talk about with everybody else.
Yeah.
Yes, there's groups all over the United States. There's groups in Canada. If you're in Canada, they have a very large group, and usually on a monthly or bi-monthly basis. Ever since COVID, especially, they have Zoom meetings instead of a lot of in-person meetings. But you can still find groups that meet monthly in libraries and such, and you don't have to be a MUFON member to enjoy any of that.
Well, that's fantastic information that both of you had provided to us, and a lot of things that I've learned myself, and be interesting to see where this all will go. And yeah, we'd love to have you back, both of you, and give us any further updates. And thank you again, Bob, for helping us there with MUFON, and Joshua. Thank you for all your hard research. Thank you. It's been really good.
Yeah, a lot to think about in this one.
Yes, thank you guys. I appreciate it. I'm very happy I met Joshua, and I'm very glad that Alex and Ruben, you guys are my friends for a long time now. So,
Likewise,
Thank
Bob.
you,
Nice
Bob.
to meet
Yeah.
you too, Alex and Ruben. This has been a great talk today. I've really enjoyed it.
Well, thank you both for your time, and we'll see you guys in 2 weeks. Catch our sister show next week, and until then, keep your eyes on the sky.